All right, so my name's Dan Polite. I'm an engineering technician. I'm out of the Elkton field office. Uh, been here since '98, so I've been here a little bit. So I'm going to go over a little bit just about the text dimensioning and some multi-leaders. Uh, and this is kind of a start of a series, if you will, of trainings that I'm going to try to put on within the next, few months and try to do it, maybe every couple of weeks or so to try to get some trainings out there for, the users. I know there's a lot of new folks that are coming into the offices and, as far as the trainings are concerned, it's going to be you know, more of a webinar based type trainings. In the past, I've gone out to offices and helped and, got people set up and things like that. But since everything with COVID, it's going to be more webinar based. What we're going to go over first, this is just an agenda. Approximately 9 to 9:30, we're going to go over MText and text. This is just kind of general uses of how we work with text in our templates. And then we're going to go over dimensioning. Then we're going to have a short break. Then we're going to go over multi-leaders and then some annotative properties, associated with text and dimensioning and things. And then we're just going to have some Q&A and some open discussion. And feel free, anytime throughout the presentation, speak up. I'm not probably going to watch the chat as much. So if you do have a question, just go ahead and, speak up, unmute yourself and speak up, and it'd be easier for me to try to answer the questions that way. But I'll try to look at the chat if need be. So first off, MText and text. This is just kind of an agenda, to kind of get, started as far as, what we can go over. Textiles, just talking about the textiles in the Maryland template, creating a textile, width factor, the oblique angle, deleting textiles within your drawing, editing MText, fields, masking of text, some express tools, and arc align text. And can everybody see my Civil 3D screen open? So regarding the MText and text, there's a couple different ways you can get to that. The one way that we're going to talk about is the styles. So there's been styles that have been set up in the Maryland templates, and there's many different ways to get to those styles. One way is, you can just type in the command line ST for style and hit enter. And here's all the textiles that are available within that template that we've created. Now you'll notice there is a lot of textiles in here. And that is because when you pull in different types of blocks and things, it's going to take those textiles and actually put them into your drawing, into the templates and things like that. And that's something that I've been working on the templates, trying to clean those up, because these templates have been around for some time. Some other folks have worked on them and created different textiles that are kind of embedded in there. So I'm trying to, get all that stuff straightened out. But you'll notice there's a lot of them in there. For example, this one, nobody uses that. But if I go ahead and right click and delete, it already tells me the style's in use and it can't be deleted. So there are some styles in there that are undeletable, if you will, and embedded. But the majority of the ones that we're going to be using are, the annotative type text styles, and we'll get a little bit more into the annotative, styles, in the presentation. So that's how you get into the styles. And you'll notice down here, I had a dynamic input on, and I'm just doing that so you don't have to look at the command line. But if you don't want to have that on, you can turn that on and off. I just like to see if I type in ST, for example, it shows up on my screen right where my cursor is. That's just a preference that I use. But if you don't want to have that and you just want to use your command line, you can just uncheck that And then once you go down to your command line, you'll just have to type in ST, and then it'll show up in your command line at the bottom. But for today's purposes, I do like to use a dynamic input for my own reference. So as far as the styles are concerned, that's basically where you go to look for your styles. And then within the NRCS, templates that we use, that's the style. Again, you type in ST for styles in your command line or in your dynamic. That brings it up, and here's all the different text styles. The other way you can do it, if you're in the Annotative tab up top, you'll notice that there is a ribbon up here called Text. And if you hit this little, I guess a little down arrow, expanded arrow, if you will, you select that, that'll give you the same splash window as if you were to type in the ST style. And then we'll go over a lot of this information, throughout the presentation of the actual styles themselves, but that's just how you get to the text style itself. So if you want to create an actual text style of your own, again, go to your styles, and then you can copy any one of these text styles to start out with. And it might be a text style that you use on a regular basis that you want to continue using within your own drawings. My recommendation is that you kind of keep them, based off of what the templates are, but there are some folks that might want to use their own. But it's as simple as, you can go ahead and click new. So you can basically, what you could do, you can call it the exact same one or call it whatever one you want. And then click OK. And what it's going to do, it's just going to take all those same parameters of whatever one that you selected. And then you can change it to whatever you want. So in this one, say we want to make the oblique angle 22 or minus 22. And just keep everything the same. Or maybe we want to make it bold. Click apply. Now, if I wanted to do some MText, you'll notice up here that that is my current text style. And you'll notice up here, if you do the drop down, it'll show that it's the 001 and it has my name underneath. Now, if I wanted to change that back to the original one, I can just hover over that and then it'll change my text back. So that's just creating an actual new text style in there. One thing that you want to keep in mind as far as text styles are concerned, if you go into your styles, so any style, and I don't know if, I believe we took all these out, but simplex, if it's a font name labeled simplex, so I'm just going to name it simplex on this. This simplex SHX, that text style is a font and a definition that it will react and recognize the plotting pen weights in the CTB file. So if the width of the font of the paper when you plot it is going to be a function of the CTB file. I've kind of gotten away from that with our CTB file, so that's why you won't see any of this, the simplex font names. It's kind of simple and just keeping it right to whatever the font is going to be is what it's set at. So the notation, it's just set at, the traditional Arial font name, and it stays as font, that way. It will take on the font style. So if you wanted to make it bold, or if you wanted to italicize it, or if you wanted to make the width factor, the oblique angle, that changes. But the CTB file will not override the thickness of that text style. So you don't really have to worry about it. But the option, if you wanted to create a type of font that had simplex in it, then you can adjust the CTB file to RCTB file to make that thicker or skinnier and things like that. You'll notice on the points one that I've created one, it's a Roman SHX file, and that is kind of a lighter, not as dark, font that sticks out. It's kind of behind the scenes, if you will. So to get back a little bit with the textiles again, there's a couple things. If you'll notice in here, if we just select any one of these, as you go through them, you'll notice on the side, there's like a little, this is basically a cross section of an engineer scale, meaning that they're annotative. So they'll change with the scale. We'll go over that a little bit further and more in the discussion later on. But if you select one of these, you'll notice that it has all these different properties associated with them already. So the size is annotative. This is the font name. It's regular. The paper text height, the width factor, and the oblique angle. So these are things that you can change yourself if you wanted to adjust that. Now you can adjust it for the textile itself, or you can do it specifically to the actual MText that you've done. So let's just do some MText, and MText is just the traditional MT for MText. I know there are folks that do single line text. You can do that. So if I wanted to do single line text, you'll notice that each one is individually selectable. So I can go in here and adjust just that specific font, and I want to, change that to a different font type. I would highlight that, and you'll notice I can't do anything with that single font type. It stays the same. Now, if I go over to my styles, I can select it. So now I can change it to whatever I want my properties. I can select that. But as far as highlighting it like we would in multi-line text and trying to go up to the ribbon, you'll see like there's like a little, cross hair circle with a cross in it that you cannot change that. So you'd have to go through your actual properties in order to change that. So my recommendation, anytime you're doing any type of text, one, keep notes on, when you're doing text, put it on the one text, layer. I mean, that's just there for text. And then the other one is make sure that you do multi-line text. It's just easier. Now, you will run into projects that people do the single line text. And in this case, if I wanted to change this into a multi-line text, I can select both of these. And I always use the text to MText. So text to MText. So TXT2, the number 2, MText, hit enter, select the 2 line text and hit enter. And now you'll notice it says one text style. Now, if I wanted to change all this as one, now I can go back up to here and it'll allow me to change that text all as one text compared to each individual text. And again, if you wanted to change the oblique angle, you could go through and change it this way. As far as, the style itself. So when you're in here, if you right click, you get a lot of different options too. You can insert symbols. degrees, plus, minus, diameters. There's a lot of different ones that you can use, squared, cubed. You can do bullets and lists. So by right-clicking on that MText, you have basically the same type of choices that you do in your ribbons. So you can keep that in mind also. So that's width and oblique. Deleting the textiles, I've kind of went over that a little bit. As far as deleting the textiles, what you want to do with those, like I said, there are some text files that are in there. For example, right now this text style, this notation B, is being used. So any text style that is being used, you won't be able to delete it. So if I go back to the one that I created, I should be able to delete that. And if it's set current, then you won't be able to delete it. So you got to make sure it's not set to current. So now it's not set to current. So now you'll see once I select it, I'm able to delete that. Do you want to delete it? Yes, I want to delete it. So now it's deleted out of there. So if you do have a text style that's set to current, it's kind of like layers. Layers are the same way. If you have a current layer that is set as your current layer, you're not going to be able to delete that specific layer. Same way with textiles also. So editing MText, again, this is bare minimum, type of training on the MText. There's a lot of information that's in MText. You can double click in here, almost like a word processor, like a Word document. You have all this information here, and you can use it just like that. So like I said, you can highlight this. If you wanted to put bullets in there, you could do lettered, you could do bulleted. You can change the case to everything in uppercase. And this here is you're just expanding your width of your justification. You can change your margins to be closer, your tabs. So there's a lot of information in there. I know some folks, they like to see this up here and have that. But another command that will basically, have your toolbar, if you will, just above where you're working at, is I think it's just a MText. If you type in MText Toolbar, and if you put the value to 1, and now if I double click in this, you'll see this is kind of like the default that used to be in previous versions of AutoCAD, that a lot of this, was right there at your fingertips. You weren't going up here and looking at the actual, ribbon. It was right here, and you can change the layer. You can change the oblique angle. So if you wanted to change this to, minus 20 on that specific one, you could do that. If you wanted to change the width, you can change that to 2. So it's just something, it's all user preference. If you wanted to center this text, within that area, you can do that using this. You can set columns, change everything, make everything bold. Same type of functions, or, same type of buttons, if you will, that you have up in the ribbon. Some people like to use that. Some people don't like to use that, but it is an option that, that you can use as far as editing your MText. Now, if you have a lot of your MText that you've done in your drawing, and you change it, it's going to affect all that MText within your drawing. So just keep that in mind too if you adjust anything. One thing that I will go over, or I'll just mention, that I see a lot in designs, and I get a lot of questions on, well, when do I put in my MText, or where do I put my MText in? Do I put it in my model space? Do I put it in my paper space? There's many mixed reviews on that. I was always taught and explained to that if you have text, it's always best to put it in paper space. And the reason being is if you were to type in, for example, I'm in 1 to 20 scale right now, and if I just did a distance on this text here, that's saying it's 3.17 feet tall in model space. Now, when I go into my viewport, into my paper space, and I set this to 1 to 20, it's going to be whatever this is set at. So if this is set at 1 notation B, you'll notice 1 notation B, here's the paper text height of what it's actually going to be. But when you put this in model space, that's 3 foot high. So that means that everything that you draw in here, the more text that you have in model space, the more memory it's going to take up in your drawing, if you will. So if you have something that's 1 to 40, guess what? It's just going to be bigger or smaller as far as the distance and the height. It's double the size. So my rule of thumb, and this is something that I've just done over the years that I've felt is the most practical way of doing things, is the only time that I ever do any type of dimensioning, text, sizing and things like that are in my profiles and cross sections. And the reason being that I do it that way is because I know that those two are set based off of my horizontal angle. So when I draw, profile, it is, horizontal 20, vertical 4. I know I can draw my horizontal scale, all my horizontal text at 1 inch equals 20 down here. So I can set this to 1 to 20, do all my text in that horizontal 20, and it's going to show all that text correctly in horizontal 20. I don't have to worry about it because I know that's what I'm going to do in my viewport and paper space. Now, if I had a plan view, and my plan view is, I don't know, just a barn or whatever, and I have Q leaders and I have multi-leader text, and I created that in 1 to 20 scale. And now I've created all that in 1 to 20 scale. Now I want to adjust it and say I want to, adjust it 1 to 40 scale. It'll adjust it as long as it's annotative. Again, we have this little, cross section. As long as it's annotative, it's going to adjust it based off of what you change it in your model space and paper space. The bad thing about it is that it'll kind of move it off to the side a little bit, because you got to figure, you notice when I made that text a little bit smaller, a little bit bigger, it's going to adjust that size smaller or larger based off of the scale that you use that. So you have to take that in consideration. So that's one of the drawbacks that I don't like to use, using the actual, MText within model space. I'd like to do all my MText, in paper space. And then that way I know it's going to be scaled correctly. It's in paper space. I can move it anywhere I want. The only thing that I have shown here is an active viewport. And then once I'm in paper space, I know it's on 1 to 1 scale, and then I can just, do it that way. Everybody understand that? I know it's a little bit confusing. I know a lot of folks I've seen a lot of drawings. That's where you really kind of, get messed up in the dimensioning side of things, where you get larger text size and smaller text size. But if you can kind of think of it as anything that you do regarding your plan view, try to keep dimensioning text and things like that out of it as much as possible, and just do that in paper space. But if you know that you're only doing, a plan view that's only going to be 20 scale, and you've got it all set up in 20 scale, and you just want to do everything in 20 scale, it's a small project, that's fine to do it in model space. But there's multiple times where if you have a complex ag waste structure, for example, that you might have, a tank shown here and a roofed HUA over here, and you might have to blow these viewports up, meaning that you have to expand those out to a closer view. So it might be 1:10 scale, because it's 2 acres of area that you're looking at, and you can't see that, so you need to zoom that in. Well, if all your text is 1:10 or 1:50 in this instance, and you needed to blow this up to 1:10, that scale, you're going to have to move all that text around, if that makes sense.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
This is Ryan.
Yes.
So question about that. When you say do it in paper space, does it mean so you pull up your plan view and just do it basically over top while you're in paper space, or do you click into the viewport and do it that way?
Great question. So basically what you do is you're in paper space. So you would draw everything in paper space. Select whatever, notation you're at. And just for anything, I'll just do MText. I'm in the text. So you'll notice here, so that's just in paper space. I'll do this to 1-D A notation. And then I'll kind of show you right now. So this is in paper space. Now, if I go to a model space in here, I'll just remove this, and we'll put this 1-D notation. So right now, you'll notice that, this is just zoomed in to what I needed to be, just as far as zoom extents. So this is paper height 0.1250. Now, when I change this, this is my viewport. If I change this to 20, you'll notice that this scale is the exact same scale when I select it. Doesn't matter if I select 1:20, 1:40, 1:100. That is going to stay the same in model space. So I guess my point is, when you have multiple text styles in here, and that's another thing I need to go over, is that you have two annotation. There's two things that I have highlighted down here. Now, I was going to go over this in a little bit, but I'll go over it now. But this shows annotation objects always, and then this basically adds the scales to this annotative object. So as I change my annotative object, so I'm at 1:20, I'm at 1:30, and 1:40. Now, if I select this and I go into my properties, or actually, I think it's settings. No. I think. So if I select my annotative scale, this tells me every scale that I selected, this text was created in every one of those scales. So 100, 20, 30, and 40. Okay. Now, if I go back and if I select 1 inch equals 10 in my paper space or in my model space that I created here. So if I select 1 to 10, it shouldn't have shown up. Because most of the time what happens is, well, actually, I'm sorry. I take that back. It should show up because what I had selected here is it's going to make it that way. If I uncheck this, and now let's go see what my annotations are now. So 30, 40. So let's do 50. This is unchecked now. So if I choose 60, so it was made in one, it's made in 50. I didn't do it in 60. So if I go in here now, and you'll notice 60 is not in there. What's going to happen is you're not going to see this show up if I change this to 60. Interesting. Making a liar out of me. That was checked. Try it again. Let's try 70. So we know it wasn't made in 70. So we'll go back to that sheet. Or maybe 1 to 5. So we didn't make it in 1 to 5, so it's not shown in 1 to 5. So this one here, basically, with that lightning bolt, it creates every time you switch to scale, it's going to show it. So I guess my point is, make sure that when you do this, you want to make sure that you have all these selected as far as your annotative scale. So I guess to answer your question, Ryan, you just basically, you put it in paper space, and you can move that all around to wherever you want. The same way with your Q leaders, everything, put it in paper space. Unless, you know, like I said, if you're doing like a profile or a cross section. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah, thanks. It does raise some questions about multi-leaders and dimensions, but we will get into that later, I expect.
Yes. Yep. So fields, again, this is something that, you know, you'll see on our on all our templates. We have fields associated with them, and that's all these gray areas, masking. So you can take any of this, double click in here, highlight it, and create a field. You can do it by document. You can do it however you want to do it, but there's multiple fields located. In the document itself, objects, you can, you know, select an object or put a formula in there. Date and time. So if you want to create a date and time, click OK. And it's going to say, okay, this document was created 11/30/2021. That's a field. So that's how fields are created within the text. So if you had multiple, you know, objects within, you know, your drawing, and you wanted to create a field to add all those objects up, you could do that using a field, and then that way it would add all those objects up. And again, masking, same thing. If I were to take MText and you can mask this. Again, you select it. The masking tool is up here. And if you want to do red, You can do a, background masking, however width, how the offset is on that. You can do that. So if you wanted to make it 1, you can make it 1, or if you wanted to make it 3, you can make it 3. You can change the colors to whatever you want. And it's kind of the same way. You just got to keep in mind masking. When you mask something, it's actually going to, go over that text or anything behind it. So keep in mind that, if you're creating a Q leader, if you're doing any type of text that's on, a profile or a cross section or over a contour line or anything of that nature, you want to try to maybe stay away from masking. The next one we're going to talk about a little bit is just the express tools of the arc line to text. So if I had an arc, for example, and I wanted to put text on that, if you go into your express tools, arc aligned, select your arc, and it comes up with this little splash window. Gives you your text height, width factor, offset. Says there's a lot of different, variables in here. You can make it bold. You can do it by layer. But if you wanted to make the width factor 2, expand it out, click OK. It'll go the entire arc. And then as you adjust that arc, you'll notice the text gets smaller, however you want to adjust it. And then the other thing is, if you put this on a specific layer, say if you wanted to change it, I don't know, to the 0 layer, and then you didn't want that to show, you can turn off your 0 layer, and then you'll show that this is arc text if you didn't want to show that. Let's see. I think that's it as far as the edit fields, MText masking, express tools, arc aligned text. Was there any specific questions on any of these? And like I said, we'll leave questions to the end. But if you have something specific now, we can go over now, or we can wait to the end. All right, so we'll get into dimensioning. Go over just the user interface, creating dimensioning.
Hey Dan, this is Jen.
Yep.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, I have a quick question.
Sure.
I don't know if you answered. So the names of the different texts, did NRCS create those? And they seem to have a convention. Did you address that?
Yeah. So basically.
So what does the convention mean, and does that help you decide what text you want to use?
Yeah. So basically, when you look at the actual text styles, if you will, all the ones that are annotative are all taken from the NRCS, I guess, national template, if you will. I did add the points one, but everything else was taken from national. As far as the paper height and things like that, the 0.125 that's your typical height that's readability as far as what you want, the 0.1250 paper text height. So it's annotated, so it doesn't matter what scale you choose, it's always going to read 0.125 in paper height.
Right, that's an eighth of an inch.
Yes, exactly. And then as you go through these, there's smaller ones. The D, from what I understand, that's the larger paper size that we use. So I always use the D for all of ours. The B is a smaller one. I
Yeah,
don't-
that's 11 by 17, I think.
Yeah, is what they recommend on 11 by 17. And then
What-
again, the D title. So that's really the main ones that you're looking at.
What does the 001 mean? Anything?
Good question. No, I'm not sure.
Okay,
Just
I thought it was
something
a
that they put-
scaling factor or something that would help me figure out what size it would end up being in the end or something like that.
No, that's just something that was in national. And I mean, if anybody else is on here that knows that, then please speak up. But that's just something that they put together as far as their naming convention. I'm sure there's some type of rhyme and reason behind it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And the one thing, if you do, if you do find yourself not using a lot of these text styles, the thing is, if you type in purge, and then if you go into your text styles, you'll notice that you can purge all these text styles out. So if I didn't want to any text styles that I wasn't using, well, we'll just go ahead and select them all, and I can say purge all checked items, and it's going to purge all those out. Now, if I go into my textiles now, oh, it didn't purge them out. That's interesting. You know why? Because I probably have to regen. Nope. That's weird. Most of the time they'll purge all that stuff out. Sometimes you have to come back in and come back out, and it might remove them, but it will remove any unwanted styles. And it's the same way with blocks. It's always a good habit that you purge out your drawing of any unused things once you're done your drawing and it's been as builded, because if you do purge out layers and things like that, non-used layers will be actually removed from your drawing. So just keep that in mind, that if you're going to purge something, purge it at the very, very end. So dimensioning, we'll just go over to user interface, creating dimensioning, the layers, how we can edit those, associative dimensioning, dimensioning styles, and how we update dimensioning. Dimensioning, same thing. I'm just going to open up. I just have some simple, lines drawn in here. Same thing under your Annotate tab, you have dimensioning. You have linear, drop down, align, angular. There's different ones. And again, some people, and this is something that I did on the actual workspaces for the Maryland templates, that I know some people still like to see these toolbars. So that's why that's on there. So you'll notice on here, even with the text styles and things like that, you can change all your text styles, just by hitting the little A here too, if you're using the toolbars. I've kind of been concentrating on the windows because that's just a good visual for everybody. But, if you do have these toolbars here, it works the same way. And to add those toolbars in, if you go to View tab, and you go to Toolbars, and then you go down to AutoCAD, you can find all these different. So the ones that are checked are the ones that I have highlighted here. So I have layers 2, multi-leader, standard, styles. That's the ones that are showing here. So if you wanted to add that, to a specific toolbar in here, you could do that. Otherwise, you can do it through the ribbons. There's so many ways of doing this stuff. You can type in, in the command line. So don't feel as though there's only one way to do this. Whatever you're comfortable with, do it that way. So the dimensioning, One thing that you'll notice here, it says use current. And if you want your dimensioning when you're doing it in your drawing, and you'll have to do this in your drawing all the time, I always do my dimensioning on one annotation. So if you change this one time in your drawing up here to dimensioning, you'll never have to change your dimensioning ever anymore. It'll always stay on that dimensioning in that drawing. Otherwise, if you have it set to use current, and if you're in one detail and you start doing a dimensioning, for example, on this, you'll notice that, I'm on the detail layer. But once I take that off and I put it to annotation, now there is a one dimensioning, layer on there. Totally up to you. You can use it. It was something that was put in there, but I use annotation on it. Totally up to you. I don't really get too worked up on the different layers, but I do recommend trying to keep things on the same layers. That way you can turn them on and off. So now it's set to annotation, and you'll notice now it's set to that annotation. And again, if I want to do dimensioning, I can do it here. So it goes across here, the same type of dimensioning in my toolbar as I have up here. Linear, angular. So if I did linear, that's just going to be straight across. So if I did linear here, is that going to give me the same length as if I were to do that on an angular? Probably not. So keep in mind when you're doing dimensioning, it takes in consideration of, you're in that 2D plane when you're drawing it. Now, when you do profiles and cross sections and things like that, and you do horizontal dimensioning, that it will be true to that horizontal dimensioning, because the vertical exaggeration of the horizontal is true compared to the vertical exaggeration, where there is some vertical exaggeration, but it will be true to that horizontal length. So keep that in mind also. But in this 2D world here, it is going to be different. Dimensioning again.
So Dan, this is Jen again. Just to clarify, the way you phrase that for everyone, the summation of what you're trying to say is that it's not wise to use angular dimensions in profiles because of the vertical distortion, the distance isn't going to be right.
That is correct. So if you draw something, if you draw something that is 1 inch equals 40 foot, and in the vertical exaggeration, and 1 inch equals 20 foot in the horizontal, if you dimension horizontally from that point of where the pipe starts to the end, that will be a true distance, even though if it's on an angle, if it's got some type of slope to it.
Yeah, I understood what you meant. I just wanted to make it clear for everybody.
Yeah. But in the 2D world, it will change.
Yep. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And again, if you wanted to change any of this information, you can go in again, this little drop down in dimensioning. So right now we're under the 1D annotation. If I wanted to modify that, and I don't know if I wanted to change my precision, let's see, to another decimal point, click OK, set current, and you'll notice that it'll adjust all those based off of my precision. Say I don't want to have the foot mark in there. So again, You can modify that. Go to your style. And modify that if you want to with the width factor, the oblique angle. This is a textile. That's why I'm getting messed up. Textile. If I go to modify, notation, and if suffix, you know, if you didn't want to have that foot mark on there, or if you wanted to have the FT afterwards, you could do that. Set current, close, and it'll adjust it based off of what you set. Now, to get back to where I know Ryan was, you know, asking about the queue leaders a little bit, and you know, how could you use those, you know, I guess in Paperspace. So right now I have, we'll just go ahead and do a quick dimensioning on this. So if you do a quick dimension, you could select it, hit enter, and you'll notice it does all this crazy stuff. If I do a quick dimension on a linear, I could select this, and it's a quick dimension, you know, just go in here, I can extend it out. Another one, real quick, before I go into the Paperspace, if you want to do a linear, I go to here, change this. Then I got another linear here. There's a continue and there's a baseline. So if I wanted to start here and say, okay, I wanted to go to this, then I want to continue to this one, and then to the end here, it's going to show me the exact same ones. Now, the other nice thing, if I do the baseline, if I start here, then I go to here, and then I go to here, you'll notice, I know it's getting kind of confusing, but it's adding those up as we go. So the baseline kind of, you know, starts out at one point and it's just adding those dimensioning up as you go throughout the process, if that makes sense. So there's some, you know, nice little dimensioning factors in here that you can do as far as you're, you know, trying to figure out what you want to do as far as dimensioning. Same way with arcs. You can dimensioning arcs. Again, you know, if you wanted to do an angle, you can select that. You know, this is 180 degree feet. If I wanted to select the radius, sorry. So this is the radius of that. Then also, if you right click on these, you can change properties too. Like if you go over here, you can have a closed fill. You can change any of those. You can have a dot. I mean, there's so many options on these. So you can do whatever you want. And I just recommend that you explore those. It's the same way with these. If you select these, actually, if you right click on these grips at the end, you can flip the arrow. So if you just want to flip it on the outside, if you want to move a text with the leader, or you want to move the dim line and you want to move it up, you can. And then again, you know, you can change these whatever you want. If you wanted to move this, some of them you won't be able to put in, but it as far as your, you know, it will override it. So sometimes you'll actually have to come into your properties and change that. So you can do this with a leader.
Dan, you're muted if you're still speaking.
All right, thanks. I don't know how that happened. I don't know where I was, but basically what I'm doing here is just making a rectangle, and I'm going to go ahead and show you basically how this is done in paper space. So in model space, we've created this 30 by 50 rectangle, and then I'm just going to expand this out just so we can have some more room here. So now you'll see all the dimensionings in here. And if I change the scale 1 to 20, you'll notice all that text is 1 to 20. Now, if I want to do my dimensioning, this is the key, Ryan, on this, is that you actually have to dimension to an actual node, if you will. So right now I'm in paper space and I want to dimension, you know, this specific rectangle. As long as I hit these nodes, and of course it didn't work right because it should be 50 feet. Let me say, that's because I'm not at a scale. I'm at 1 to 20, okay. Let me lock that. That's interesting. Because that should, if you're on a node, it should read that specific to that dimensioning. I've never had problems with that before.
Yeah, Dan, that's always been my experience. I couldn't wrap my head around how I understood your recommendation for the text in paper space. Sometimes I don't always do that, but that's my personal preference. But I understood what you're trying to say. But I'm like, how are you dimensioning in paper space and not having it give you the dimension that that thing is in paper space?
I'll tell you why, because I didn't have this selected, the annotative objects. So that has to be selected. That's why. So now I'm in paper space again. And now it's showing me it's 30 by 50. It's just because I didn't have that selected from the previous. So again, if I'm in model space and I wanted to do a rectangular rectangle, and I wanted to do 50 by 100. Sorry, rectangle. First corner dimension 50 by 100. So now we know that's 50 by 100. I'm in paper space. It's locked. It's a 1 to 20. I'm going to dimension that. 50 by 100. So that's in paper space. It was just because I didn't have this on. So that basically what that's doing, again, it's just making sure that you add all your annotated scales. So if your scales are not added up in your model space, if that's not selected, it just throws a wrench into everything. So I always keep it that way, both of these on, and I never run into any problems.
Now, Dan, if you're in paper space and you pan around, is that dimension now locked down to that rectangle?
Yes.
Okay.
No.
Oh, see, that's
No.
okay.
Nope.
All right, so you got to make sure your viewport is locked the way you want it before you start messing with it. See, that's why I don't. Okay. All right.
Yes. So that's a great point. So basically what you're doing with that, and see, that's where you can run into a lot of problems, because people that are doing, a scale 1 to 20, and then they do all their dimensioning in 1 to 20 in model space, and then they have their scale 1 to 40, then their dimensioning is too large or too small, and then that's why it doesn't look the same. So that's why you really want to pay attention, with your dimensioning. You don't have to do dimensioning in paper space, but if you know that's where your drawing is going to be, it doesn't matter. I mean, you can move this to wherever you want. I mean, you can take these dimensions. I mean, as simple as it sounds, you can reassociate those dimensions. In other words, I know it sounds harder than what it sounds, more work than what it really needs to be, but you can reassociate those dimensionings by, selecting it. Actually, I got to be in model space. Actually, you might have to be in model space to do that. But the only other thing is that you can, if you did have to move that, you can always move these back to where they need to be. I know, but that's great. I mean, that's a great point, because when you're in paper space and you have all your text there, yes, when you move your drawing, all that stuff stays where it's at. You are correct.
Yeah,
You
that's
are
why,
correct.
like, things I don't want to move, I tend to put in model space, and then all the other stuff I put in paper. But that's a personal preference. But yeah, that does make, you have to be sure you're going to set that the way you want it before you, or you'll be doing more work to move stuff around.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I mean, I do the majority of my drawings in, model space, and then I do all my cue leaders and things of that nature, in the actual paper space, just because I'm just accustomed to doing it that way, just so I don't have text everywhere in my model space.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thanks.
So the same thing, if you wanted to change dimensions and update them, you saw, it's the same process like with text. You can update, any of this. So if I did 1D notation, and if I modified that, and, I changed my precision back to where it needs to be, my units, actually put this back to that, click OK, set current, close, and you'll notice this all goes back to where it was originally. So you can adjust all that to, whatever you need as far as the dimensioning is concerned. All right, well, that's it for dimensioning. Why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break, meet back here at 10:18, and then we'll go through the multi-leaders and then annotative properties, and then, we'll go through any questions. And I'll be on here if anybody has any questions.
Hey, Dan, I do have a question for you, though.
Yes, sir.
Can you place text similar to the way you did with the over the arc? Could you do that with just the regular line and have the text automatically align to the line itself? Or do you have to place the text and rotate it to the line?
So you're just talking about like if you had a polyline that was like this and you just wanted to place text above that?
Correct. Yeah. Like if the line was like rotated at an angle or something, could you have the text come in at the angle of that line, like above or below it? Or do you just have to place the text and then rotate it to that?
Hey, Dan, I have a quick question.
Yep.
You got the dimensioning tools on your toolbar there on your quick access bar.
Yes.
I'm not able to get those on there. Can you run me through
Sure.
that real quick?
Yep. So if you go into your View tab,
Yeah.
and then if you go to Toolbars all the way to the right,
Yep.
and then AutoCAD,
Yeah.
and then if you select Dimension, they should pop up.
Yeah, I did do that, and I don't know if it's popped up somewhere and I just don't see it, but I can't seem to find it.
Do you have two screens?
Yes.
Because sometimes it'll pop over to the other screen too.
Yeah, there they all are. Okay.
Yep.
Yep. It's hiding there. Thank you.
Yep. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started again. So the next text type are multi-leaders. Again, going over to user interface, some of the multi-leader styles, just creating a multi-leader and editing multi-leaders. So this is probably the biggest one that I would say most folks use on a regular basis. Me personally, there's different styles. And basically it's controlled just like any other style. You can use the default multi-leader style standard or create your own. But most of the time, it's up to you on how you want to do them. There is a toolbar here, that you could, put in here for your multi-leader. Again, under Annotate, you have a ribbon up here. And, sorry that I keep repeating myself, but a lot of this stuff, is in multiple locations. So when, actually, let me see, where'd that go? So my multi-leader style, that came over here. So right now there's one, two, technically 3 of them that are annotative, that we should normally use as far as our styles. And you can set it current, you can modify it again. I'll just do a real quick one to show you. So you can do a multi-leader just by selecting the multi-leader command, and you'll see it's _M leader. And you'll notice the default, it splines everything. And you'll notice, depending on, again, with the leaders, it's under the text style. So if you want to do text or if you want to do annotation, however you want to do it, totally up to you. But you'll notice on this one, we're at 1 inch equals 50. And then when you start changing scales with the multi-leader, it does get really funny. I will, definitely let you know on that, especially with the splines, because you'll notice if you don't make your error long or your line long enough, the error is not going to show up. As if you were make it too small, it does some crazy things. So me personally, I don't like to use the spline. I always type in LE for just, it's the quick, easy, what they call quick leader. Or you can just go, I believe up here, one of these is a quick leader. Maybe not. That's a line. I just always type in QL for Q leader. So if you notice, there's a drop down for settings. So you can type in S for settings or hit the drop down and hit enter. And this is the leader settings. You can have annotation type as MText. You can copy an object, tolerance, block reference. So most of the annotation type that you're going to do is MText. You're going to prompt for width, for your width of actually how wide it is. You can put a frame around it if you want to. You can always left justify it. I don't mess around with the annotation reuse. Leader line, mine set up as straight. That's what I default mine to. My arrowhead, I default closed fill, but if you want to change anything, you can do that. If you have number of points, you can have, no limit, or you can have a maximum. And then the first segment can be any angle, or if you wanted to do it horizontal, you can do it horizontal. So in other words, when you draw that first line, it could be a 45-degree up, and then the second segment can be 90 degrees. So every time you draw a leader, it's going to go up 90 degrees or up 45 and over 90. Or you can do any angle, however you want to do it. Attachment, this is just how the leader is attached. If it's attached to the model, the middle of the bottom line, or middle of the top of the line, text on the right side, text on the left side. You can underline the bottom line if you want to. So there's a lot of settings that you can go into. Click OK, and it's going to ask me for the first point. And then again, because I selected that, point, the next point, whatever I want, I select there. And then I always do F8 as the horizontal, so it goes 90 degrees. So if I hit that, the left mouse button, and then it's going to ask me what my text width is. You can hit enter, just keep it at 0, and then it'll extend it out. And then you hit enter once, and then you can do a hard return or enter, and then you can do other text beyond that, or you can just hit enter again, and it completes the command. Now you'll notice, if I zoom out here, by double clicking here, you can adjust that width if you want to also. And anytime with this, you can, if you wanted to center it, if you wanted to left justify it, you want to bold it, if you wanted to make it a different, it's the same. Everything builds off the MText formatting. So just, if you can learn the MText formatting, you'll you'll master all this stuff with dimensioning and queue leaders. So MText is kind of like your building blocks, if you will. So the other way, if I wanted to do another queue leader, and I went to settings, just to kind of give you an idea, if I wanted to do my first one at 45 and then a 90, click OK. First point, so you'll see my first one is at 90. Second one's at 90, hit enter. Just a little different. And then again, if you want to change settings again, and actually it probably should have been, oh, that's a second. It should have been horizontal. Oh, first segment should have been 45, and then that's horizontal, I believe. So it's just doing it to ortho is what it's doing. So it's, if I have my ortho on, it's not allowing me to do that. And then that will go my horizontal this way. And then again, hit enter. So it's all on how you set this up. You know, if you're familiar with doing, you know, queue leaders with splines, some people do like to use splines. I'm not against it, but it's all on how you do it or what your preferences are. And then once you have your queue leader, you can go in here and you can change the type. You can do line with no arrow. You can do a spline, so you can do it, you know, after the fact if you wanted to do a spline. Spline with an arrow. You can change the arrow type if you want a dot, open, oblique, however you want to do it. You can do a box filled, anything you want to. So the multi-leaders are pretty straightforward. You know, there's not too much that you have to do on your multi-leaders. You know, you can, you know, as far as the, I guess the properties of the queue leader themselves, you can just change whatever you want. It's just like anything else. You can change the text within there. Again, keep in mind that if you have these annotative, you got to make sure these are set. Otherwise, it's not going to change in, you know, your paper space, in your viewport. So again, you know, even what Jen alluded to earlier is that, you know, if you are doing any type of, you know, text outside in paper space and you have your model space and you're referring it to, one thing that, you know, I've always done, if, you know, I have a drawing, for example, if I just make, I don't know, so that's my rectangle. So there's my rectangle. And if I wanted to do any type of queue leaders or anything, so one thing I will show you. So nobody brought up the question or didn't say anything why none of that showed up. That's because, well, I didn't have this select, show annotation objects always. So if I don't have that selected, it's not going to show any of my annotation objects. So that's another key. So if you if you see in here that, you know, hey, I have all this text, but when I come back to my paper space, there's nothing shown up, make sure this annotation objects is selected or it won't show up. So like I said before, always have these two selected. It's easier to do that. The default on our templates are shown that way, so kind of keep it that way is my recommendation. And again, you know, now we're in paper space, so if I wanted to, you know, do a leader again, and of course, you know, here's your leader, notation B, notation A. If I want to select notation B, go ahead and type in LE for leader. Proposed building. I go ahead and move this building. And what happens? The leader stays with it. A little bit different than dimensioning. The leader will stay with that. Now, if you have this and it's in paper space and you say, oh, I need to move this one way or the other, you can highlight, you know, everything and move it to wherever you want in paper space and just move it as one function. And then, you know, if you have to move this, then you can select all your stuff in model space and move it to, you know, wherever you need be, you know, to line everything up to what you need. So you can do it that way too. Viewports and paper space, that's going to be a whole separate training because I know that gets very confusing with folks too. But, you know, just keep in mind that multi-leaders, you know, you can change those to whatever you'd like. And I think that's about it on the queue leaders. Any questions on those specifically? They're pretty straightforward, but you do have some options. You know, just keep in mind anytime you select them, any of your text, there are, you know, the properties on the right hand side that you can change this stuff. I know there are overrides, so, and that's one thing in dimensioning that I didn't show, but if I were to dimension this box, for example, and it says 41.5, and if I select that and I go down to text, the measurement is 41.4991, I can override that to 42 feet, whatever. So the one thing I can say for users and for reviewers, it's very important that, you know, if you see something and somebody, you know, says, oh, it's 42 feet, and you look at the measurements at 41.499, well, something's off. So it's a good habit to try to dimension correctly. Try not to use that override. Now, obviously on the override, sometimes you will have to do that. And can anybody give me an example when you might have to override that dimensioning? There's probably the one that everybody has to override it on. Vertical exaggeration. So when you do anything in vertical exaggeration, it's going to give you some goofy number because it is a vertical exaggeration. So you will have to go into your dimensioning and override that to what that's actually supposed to be. So that's the one place that you should be using the text override. Otherwise, it's not going to give you the true, you know, footage on something like that. But on horizontal, you know, you should be right on the money as far as the dimensioning is concerned. Any questions on the Q leaders? All right, so the next one we're going to get into is the annotative properties. So this is probably the biggest, I guess, biggest hurdle that people try to, I guess, they fumble around a little bit with it, because if you're using annotative properties, all your text should be the same size. And I've seen it on multiple drawings, and I've done it before where you have multiple different sizes of text that come through, and it's unfortunate that when you look at these annotative properties that you just got to make sure it's set to annotative and you have those buttons selected down at the bottom, which, like I said, they're defaulted in the templates that way. So you shouldn't have no problems with the text size being different in different areas. Now, granted, if you want to make a text size a little bit bigger because you want that to draw someone's attention, so if it's a title or a subtitle, that's most certainly okay to use. But if you have multiple leaders going in the same area and they're all different sizes, something's not clicking right. So we just want to make sure all that is continuously the same throughout the entire drawing. So annotative text, again, you go into your text style, kind of like I explained in the beginning. It's got the little cross section of the annotative scale, meaning that every scale that this is drawn in, meaning that you have to have these selected down at the bottom. Every scale that it's selected at, made in, it's going to create that scale, and it's going to show up the same throughout. So if it's selected as annotative, the size, it's going to be defaulted to whatever paper text height is selected. If this was unchecked as far as annotative, it's only going to be 0.125. Doesn't matter. It's not going to change. It's always going to be 0.1250 in that specific scale that you set it at. So if it's 1 to 60, it's going to be 0.1250. At 1, at 50, it's going to be a different height. So it's not going to be annotative to that specific paper height. When we first originally did, when we got into Civil 3D, we used to have 1 inch equals 10 scale, 1 inch equals 20, 1 equals 30, and folks had to determine, okay, if I'm plotting in the 30 scale, I had to select 1 inch equals 30. Well, with the annotative, it does that automatically for you. It adjusts it based off of what scale you're in. It does all the math for you. And they can be annotative in the text, your text styles, in blocks, hatching, attribute definitions, all your dimensionings, and of course your multi-leaders that we just went through. So just to kind of give you an idea of what annotative text is, if I don't have any of these selected for right now, and I'm in the 1 to 20 scale, and I'm going to go to one text, and I'm just going to type MText. So right now, I've created this in 1 to 60 scale. It's annotative. It's at 0.1250. I didn't have any of my annotation objects selected, and I didn't add scales to that annotative object, okay? I'm going to draw a box around this. Now, a couple ways you can draw a box. Actually, I believe it's in Express Tools, Enclose Object. You can select it, hit enter. You can do an offset distance. You can do the default of 0.35, it's fine. And you can do a circle, slot, rectangles, and we'll just do a rectangle for now. Now, if I do a variable, it's going to adjust based off of my text size getting larger on this. But in this exercise, I'm going to say constant. So I don't want it to change size because I want to show you what happens. So maintain constant rectangle, both width and height. Okay. So I'm just going to put that on the one annotation layer. Okay. So now that's what we've created. And this is, well, I'll just put this is 1 inch equals 60 feet. So you can kind of see that box didn't change. So I'll extend it out a little bit. So we did it 1 inch equals 60 feet, and it's annotative text, but we didn't change this. Now, if I were to change this in model space, the text would disappear. It would only show on the scale it was created in. Okay. So if I were to change this to 1 to 50, the text disappears. So with that being said, there's some people that do drafting in, certain scales that they don't want their actual text to show up in. And so if they're doing scales of 1 to 20, and then they do their model space and they create a drawing and everything's in 1 to 30, none of their 1 to 20, dimensioning, text, Q leaders, or anything, if they don't have this selected, it's not going to show up in that 1 to 30 because they did everything in 1 to 20. So just keep that in mind. So now if we go back to 1 to 60, it's showing, oh, okay, it's done in 1 to 60. If I go to my annotation scale, if I select 1 to 50, again, it's not going to show it. Does everybody understand that? So now, if I have this, show my annotation objects. So the model space was changed, say 1 to 50. It's showing 1 to 50. So it's adding that scale 1 to 50 in there. 1 to 40, I'm adding that scale in there. So it's showing those different scales. So I'm adding those scales in there. Now, if I want to add the scales to the annotative objects, meaning that they're going to scale based off of what that annotation scale is, I have to have this selected. So this means this is only showing it all those different scales that I've created, but this is actually going to make it annotative to that. So if I select this as 1 inch equals 60, it's only annotated in 1 inch equals 60. So I can either add a scale in here and say, okay, well, I want to add 1 to 20. Click OK. So now if I go to 1 to 20, is it going to show up in 1 to 20? Yes, because I added that scale in there. If I go to 1 to 30, is it going to show up? Am I going to see any text here? Yes, because I have this selected. 1 to 40. So now if I go in to my annotation scales, you'll notice every time I select a different scale, it's adding 20, 30, 40, 60. If I don't have this and I want to put 50 in here, so now I'm going to add 50. Didn't have this selected. You'll notice 50 is not shown in there. So this is 1 inch equals 60. And going back to here, since I had this selected, annotation, one inch equals 50. It's not added in there. And then it should now be added in there since I selected that. So now 1 inch equals 50 is added in there. Does that make sense? I know it's a lot of information, but that basically, shows you how that text is added, within the scale. So that box stays the same, but the dimensioning, as I move this, you can see it gets smaller and larger based off of, what I have. And the key here, I guess the take home point is you must have all these, this one, show the annotative objects always, and also add the scales to the annotative objects when you go back and forth to scales. So if you go to 1 to 20, 1 to 10, as I went through that exercise, it added those to it.
So you pretty much just leave those highlighted, leave those two on.
Yep. Just leave those on, and then it'll add it, and then you don't have to worry about, any of that annotated text not showing up. Because I've gotten phone calls where people say, oh, well, I put my text in there, but it's not showing up. And they did the annotative text in 1 inch equals 60, but they did their model space in 1 inch equals 50, and now their text isn't showing up because it wasn't done in 1 inch equals 60. It was done in 1 inch equals 50. So if you have those selected, it's going to eliminate all those problems for you and headaches. Now, one thing you'll notice if you do this, it'll show all those annotative text, from 1 inch to, well, what did we do here? We have all the different scales here that we added on this one. Let's see. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So if I type in selection, anno, display, if I set that to 1, you'll notice that's all the different scales that it's set at. So it'll show, if you select that text, it shows every one of them. Well, you don't want to have that, set that way. So to turn that off, you just want to set the value to 0. The default is 1, so you just want to select that to 0. And then that way, when you select that, it's only selecting whatever the current annotative scale is set at. And I think we kind of went over a little bit on the MText and creating the annotative text. It's the same thing. If you wanted to create text that was annotative, you can do that. You just got to make sure that it's set as annotative. That's really the key to that. Another way to draw a box around this, you can type in T-circle is another command, and you can select the object, hit enter, default, rectangle, and do a constant. Or in this case, we'll do variable. So if I did variable, and now I change this to 1 to 40, it's not going to change that block. What the variable does is if I have multiple text, so if I have, I don't know, let me do an MText 20, and then I want to change this size to 2.5. What the variable does if I type in T-circle, actually I'd have to do both of them. Select the objects, offset distance. If I wanted to do a circle around those, if I do variable or constant, if I do constant, it's going to stay the same size around it. So it doesn't matter what the text size is, it's going around the largest one. Compared to variable, .35 circle variable, you'll notice that it varies the size based off of whatever the text size is. So that's just some little, tips and tricks, I guess, if you will, for, putting circles, or if you want to do rectangles for elevations and things like that. It's always nice to, have that little tool, but I always type in T-circle, but you can get to it up here. Guess it's up into your express, enclose an object. And you can auto number things. Oh, here, this might be, let's see, let's fit the text between specific points. I was trying to think of what you're looking at, Brian, but that might be something. That's just a fit command. So that's annotative text. Trying to think of anything else that I have as far as the dimensioning, annotative text. I think that's pretty much about it. Regarding text and scales, and the only other thing I guess I could go over a little bit on the annotative blocks. As far as blocks are concerned, when we're bringing in blocks, to the drawing and things like that, we have, all our different, blocks that we have up in our templates, and they're already predetermined sizes, and they are annotative, meaning that, if you were to go in, just for example, so if I were to just go to new drawing, I don't know. So these blocks are all annotative. I'll try to find something with some text. So if I copied this, and I pasted that in here, if I double click in here to, enter my pipe size, say 6 inch, click OK. move this over if I want to. If I make this larger, so if I wanted to scale this and I wanted to make it 2 times larger, or scale to whatever, it's going to scale that object in there. It's annotative. So all of the blocks that have attributes to them have associated properties to them. So if you make that bigger or smaller, it's going to, adjust accordingly to that block. So that's just the annotative block is all that means.
And I do have a question. And
Sure.
Please forgive my CAD ignorance. But I do notice that we are typing in a lot of nomenclature into the command line. Is there a list of what those are that we can get to?
What do you mean as far as like a quick shortcut?
Yeah,
thing?
so like we know to type in MText if we want to do text or.
Yeah, I do have a and I'll send it out to everybody. It's a it's like a quick command cheat sheet, if you will. And actually, I can put it with the handouts. And I'll put it in the handouts here, and then that way it's in the video.
Wonderful, thank you.
Yep.
Hey Dan, would it good to put that on SharePoint so it's not buried in some training?
Yeah. Yep. I could definitely do that too.
Thanks.
Well, that's pretty much all I have. Unless there's specific questions people have, regarding, certain problems that they've run into or certain things that they've seen. Now is the time to, ask those questions. I know there are some, engineers on here that, review plans and see this, every day. And, if it's something that, you want me to go over or try to, troubleshoot and explain to folks, I guess this is the time to do that.
Hey, Dan.
Yes.
Say you're in a template and you don't have like a annotative 1 to 80 scale. How would you make a 1 to 80 scale that you could use?
So basically, if you want to actually make a scale, you can just go to custom scale, and you can just, it's 1 to 60. You can just hit add, call it, 1 inch equals 80 feet. And then paper units 1, 80 is your drawing units. Click OK. So now you have a 1 to 80 in here, and you can move it down so it's in order. Click OK. So doesn't matter now, even though you're in 1 to 80, long as you pick that it's annotative, it's going to annotate to that 1 to 80. So all you have to do is create an additional scale, if you will. So now I'm in 1 to 80. 1 to 60. You can see it. It's already done it. I mean, it's changed that annotative to move up to 1 to 80.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yeah, and if there's certain scales, I know I had some requests to add some, additional scales, like, I think 1 to 5, 1 to 2 were 2 of them that I added to our templates. If there's specific scales that you guys, feel necessary that you use on a regular basis, feel free to shoot me an email and let me know that, hey, I use 1 to 35 all the time or whatever. Most certainly I can, add those in there, and then they're in the templates, and, that way you don't have to add them every time, when you're in there.
Hey, Dan, this is Luke.
Yes. Hey, Luke.
Hey, I have a problem with, I'm not sure how to really explain it, but when I have my design work in model space and I try to bring it into a viewport, I have a state computer, and it seems like it takes it like 20 minutes every time. Like it can't get the scales right for it to show up correctly in my viewport. And I keep going back and forth and playing with the scales, and all of a sudden out of the blue, it'll just show up. But in the meantime, it'll be way off scale. Like, I can barely find it.
So sometimes, and this is across the board, and we'll probably go over this, and once I create the model space and paper space training, a lot of times, like when you have a large design that's going on, and you have multiple viewports, and you create different viewport scales, sometimes you have to come in and out of that page or that sheet and come back in, and then it'll show up. It's just something with Civil 3D that you have to do, and it does take some time sometimes to do that. So what's happening with you is normal. It's just something. What I would recommend doing, if you do create a viewport and it's to a scale, and you double click the middle of your mouse button to zoom extents, it's going to show everything, and then you set it to 1 inch equals 20 scale, and then you go out of this page, and then you come back into this page, it should kind of reconfigure itself. For whatever reason, it's something that happens with Civil 3D.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions that anybody has?
Hey, Dan, can I make a few comments?
Sure.
Yeah, so just some general text and dimensioning type of drafting related comments that we see on a lot of plans. So for one thing, Dan went over the fonts and the text that gets put in. You should really try to make sure that you are using the same font on like all the text that you put in, like on all the pages. I see a number of designs and drawings that have different text, like even the font size, the font itself and the size of it too. So all of your text should be the same size, like for like notes and things, like general type of text, like they should all be the same size, not counting like titles and subtitles, like Dan mentioned. But all the text in general should all be the at least close to the same size. Some of the stuff I see is drastically off, and it just makes the drawings look odd, or just out of sorts with the different sizes and the different fonts. And along the same lines, when you're using the fonts, the text itself, I see a lot of them that are either all caps, or like some of the text is all caps and some of it is a mixture of upper and lowercase. Really, you should try to make them all the same. I know that's difficult with the way some of the templates and the blocks are, that they're not just all set up that way, but for the most part, you should try to make it that way as much as you possibly can, to have them all the same and just make it more uniform look to the plans. And the same for the dimensions. Like the dimensions should all be the same size, and they should also all be the same units for the particular detail or profile that they're related to. Like if you're measuring, if all your dimensions are in feet, you shouldn't have a mixture of feet and inches in that same detail. Like they should all be the same. I mean, of course, there's some, instances where that's not going to be always possible, but you should just try to keep it that way for the most part. I just wanted to bring that up because I see that on a lot of plans that I make comments about. That's a general, thing that everyone should try to be doing.
No, and I think that's all great, comments, Brian. And, sometimes it is difficult, when you're looking at these plans and, some people put in 12 inches and then the next, detail over it says, 1 foot. And, I try personally, with all the details that we have, I try to do the same thing. I try to keep everything, within that, block the same units and measures. And I find myself the same way sometimes, mixing that up a little bit. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It definitely makes a lot nicer having that same unit throughout the drawing and throughout the block itself, or throughout the whatever detail you're using. I will say, as far as the caps and things like that, if you were to do MText, for example, there is a way to do this. So if you right click this, you can go to your properties. In here, you can do all your justification, things like that. But there's also, if you go into your home under your annotate, there is an all caps. Actually, if you double click it, if you highlight it, there is an all caps button. So if you want to do all caps, you could, or you can do all lowercase. And it's even up here too, where you can do the all caps, uppercase, lowercase. So it's a fairly quick and easy way of doing things. And another thing that I'll go over that I didn't go over is spelling. So if you ever want to do a spell check of your entire document, you can just type in spell. And believe it or not, you can do the entire drawing. You can do just a specific section. So in this case, I'll do the entire drawing. I hit start. So it's going to ask me and give me suggestions to this. So say it's not in the dictionary, I can add it to, if I wanted to, I can change it. So say I just wanted to change it to leader, I can hit change. So it's going to change that. And then it's checking my entire drawing. Okay, well, what's in here that, is not in the dictionary or spelled incorrectly? So it's checking the spelling of everything that's in that document. So that's another good check, once you do your drawing, it's kind of one of those last resort things. You can ignore all for the NRCS, or you can add it to the dictionary. But it goes through them all, and that way you realize, okay, well, I know exactly what's in my drawing. If I mess something up, I might have did something incorrectly, you can do that. Another thing is, if you had, for example, I don't know, I know with some of the details, for example, some of the older drawings, what do we have in older drawings that, it's not supposed to be called quote unquote filter cloth, right? So if we go in here under find text, and we can type in filter cloth, and I can find and replace. So here's find what? I want to find filter cloth, and what do I want to replace it with? Go textile. Find where. I can do entire drawing again, or current space, or layout, or selected objects. You can hit find, and it's going to basically highlight all the ones that it's going to find, and then I can either replace it, or find next, or replace all. So I can replace that. All right, I'm going to replace it. One match found, one object change. Click OK. Then you can go ahead and hit done. So that's a good tool. Also, when you're running through trying to clean up your drawing and things like that. And even for reviewers, if they want to find something specific that, they're looking for in a drawing, they can do a specific, just like I said, filter fabric, for example, if, it wasn't, it should be, say, geotextile, you can find that fairly quick within the drawing. It's kind of like, any other Microsoft, software that's out there, you can actually, search and find that. So it's a good, tool here, finding that with the text.
Thank you for that tip. It will be very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's some great comments, Brian. I appreciate that, and I know it's difficult to try to get everybody on the same page. And we have a lot of new folks, being hired on, and I kind of want to, try to start at the basis of, understanding how to do little things like this. I think my next training, I'm going to try to get together for 2 weeks from today, and try to go over some of our templates and, how to, look at those templates. I know we had our NRCS workshop, and I kind of buzzed through that fairly quick. So I want to kind of revisit that and try to have folks a little bit more understanding of what the templates are about, how to customize everything, and, get that, up and running, and then, move forward with that and going into the other trainings with the points and things like that. So, here in the next, like I said, few months, I'm going to try to keep on top of these trainings on at least a monthly basis, if not, more often. But if there's anything specific that anybody, wants training or feels the need that, folks are struggling on, especially reviewers, the CETs, the engineers, if you guys, see something that, is just a constant, problem, or, a struggle for folks, or if people are constantly coming to you saying, hey, I don't know how to do this, shoot me an email. We can discuss that, and we can come up with a training plan on that. Even if it's a hour long or something like that, anything is going to help everybody within the state. And we want to try to make it as easy as possible for everyone, because I know it is a complex project or program, and we want to make it as easy as possible for folks where they're not struggling, with the CAD portion of things. I know it's hard enough to learn all the software and the design programs and things like that. And, this should be the quote unquote fun part of the job of, putting it all together and making it look nice. And we want you to have that, information at your fingertips, so you're not, frustrated with a lot of things. Well, if nobody else has any questions, then I guess that'll be it for this training. And I do have some, some things on here, just the training resources in general. Don't forget about the MarylandCADusers.com. That is our blog site. That's where a lot of all these trainings and such are placed on. It's a good resource for everybody. On the job training is probably the best training, and the senior techs out there, CETs, your area engineer, your state engineer, all those resources are out there. Don't be shy. I'm just an email away, IM away, phone call away. Don't feel as though that, you're bothering me by any means. Feel free to give me a shout. This is more on the NRCS side of things for AutoCAD, support resources. They do have, basically, you can go on Google and try to find things, if you're, can't find an answer or something. But of course, there's other things that, NRCS has, contracts with that, if you feel as though, hey, I want to know a little bit more about something else, there are folks that are out there that, are contracted through NRCS to, give that support. They do have, the retrieve, library. I know it probably goes into more depth of what we really need, and they do go over just the specific NRCS templates. So it's a little bit different than what we have here in Maryland, but you still can get the same features out of what they talk about with the CAPS and their training library. Then of course, like I said, there is an NRCS CAD users SharePoint site. Unfortunately, it's not available for the state or non-federal users, but they do have a CAD related site for any type of forums and things like that, and other trainings that I think they're trying to put other trainings that other districts have or other states have done on there too. And then of course the NEH 641 CAD standard and the drafting drawing standard, which you can find on that. And then again, we do have Andrew Walther, who was the one that does all the CAPS training, and he's the one that basically created all this. And that's where I get a lot of my training resources from, and and try to critique it to what we need here in Maryland. But most certainly, any of this information is good information for you folks to look at. And me personally, I don't go through any of that stuff. I kind of Google it myself and then try to do it that way. But I do find myself sometimes having to contact somebody outside of that. And again, just some things to know. If you have a question, ask. Again, there's always different ways to do the same thing. Just find what works best for you. It's kind of like what Charlene was saying. If I'm just typing in, ST for styles compared to somebody that, just goes up to a ribbon and, pulls it down. Everybody has their own ways of doing things. And, what I train people on, I'm not saying that's the only way to do it, and not saying that's the perfect way to do it. I'm just showing you the different ways of doing it, and whatever you're comfortable with, that's what you need to use. And just keep in mind what you're using, AutoCAD and Civil 3D for. What project are you working on? How detailed it has to be. And then, like I said, use the help resources. And this program can be as simple or as complicated as you want to make it. And then just spend time using the program, and whenever possible watch other people around you that have some experience, or ask around, because that's really how you get the best use out of a program. And like I said, if you need anything as far as assistance on specific problems within Civil 3D, or if you just want to know how to do something, Teams is awesome. I can share a screen. We can walk you through it, figure things out. So don't be bashful as far as calling or anything. So that's all I have. If anybody else has any questions, comments, or anything, feel free to give me a shout, shoot me an email or whatever. But that's all I have.